Good morning, second graders, and happy Monday. I hope everyone had a nice weekend. I don't know about all of you, but I'm definitely liking this nice rainy morning. Kind of feels like a nice way to get started with a new week. So I will be posting your your schedule for today, the things that we need to get done, and kind of just a general look at this week in a few minutes. But before that, I did just want to take a few minutes for a little morning meeting to say hello and to just see how everyone's doing. So I just wanted to share, and I was hoping that people who would like to could share with me. I know last week I had some students sending videos on Class Dojo and also through email, but if you're ever not sure how to do that, you can just go to portfolios, and there should be a little record video option there as well. But one thing that I'd like people to respond to who are willing, just one fun thing that you did this weekend. Now, I know this can be, again, kind of a strange time where we're forced to stay inside for a lot longer than we're used to. So I figured this is maybe a cool way to share some of these fun things that you're doing, and then maybe we have some good ones, and I can share them out with all of you as well. So I'm thinking about one thing that my family did this weekend, um, was we made a nice banana bread um, out of just ingredients that we found around our house. So if any parents are watching and they would like the recipe, reach out to me. But Jace gave us permission to use a few of his bananas. We made some banana bread. Um, and boy, that was fun, let me tell you. So I'm going to be reading to you guys a little bit today as well. Now, the book that I'm getting, I promised to have more books starting this week, but I don't have them yet. So what I was thinking is I could read you a book on Epic, and then if people are interested, you can also log into Epic at home and read along with me. Or some of you might have this book already. It's called Sideways: Stories from Wayside School. Um, so again, if you're on Epic, I assigned it to the class, so you can go into your assigned books and you can see it there. You can read along. So again, those students now that I have all logged in are Mason, Hunter, Chase, Blossom, Ava, and Artie. I have you guys all set up. Everyone else, again, please let me know. I know some invitations, maybe you went to the wrong email address, or there was one email address that I put in incorrectly. So again, please let me know, everyone. But either way, I'm going to be switching over to Epic on my computer, so I apologize if it looks like I'm just staring at you. But again, you can follow along on Epic. You can pause this video if you need to sign over to Epic. But here we go. So chapter 1 is titled Mrs. Gorf. Okay, again, if you're going there, excellent. If you're not, you can just listen if you like and sit back, or whatever you want to do. So, Mrs. Gorf had a long tongue and pointed ears. She was the meanest teacher in Wayside School. She taught the class on the 13th story. If you children are bad, she warned, or if you answer a problem wrong, I'll wiggle my ears, stick out my tongue, and turn you into apples. Mrs. Gorf didn't like children, but she loved apples. Joe couldn't add. He couldn't even count. But he knew that if he answered a problem wrong, he would be turned into an apple. So he copied from John. He didn't like to cheat, but Mrs. Gorf had never taught him how to add. One day, Mrs. Gorf caught Joe copying John's paper. She wiggled her ears, first her right one, then her left, stuck out her tongue, and turned Joe into an apple. Then she turned John into an apple for letting Joe cheat. Hey, that isn't fair, said Todd. John was only trying to help a friend. Mrs. Gorf wiggled her ears, first her right one, then her left one, stuck out her tongue, and turned Todd into an apple. Does anybody else have an opinion? She asked. Nobody said a word. Mrs. Gorf laughed and placed the 3 apples on her desk. Stephen started to cry. He couldn't help it. He was scared. "I do not allow crying in the classroom," said Mrs. Gorf. She wiggled her ears, first her right one, then her left, stuck out her tongue, and turned Stephen into an apple. For the rest of the day, the children were absolutely quiet. And when they went home, they were too scared even to talk to their parents. But Joe, John, Todd, and Stephen couldn't go home. Mrs. Gorf just left them on her desk. They were able to talk to each other, but they didn't have much to say. Why do you think they didn't have much to say? Yeah, I guess apples don't talk very much. Their parents were very worried. They didn't know where their children were. Nobody seemed to know. The next day, Kathy was late for school. As soon as she walked in, Mrs. Gorf turned her into an apple. Paul sneezed during class. He was turned into an apple. Nancy said, "God bless you," when Paul sneezed. Mrs. Gorf wiggled her ears, first her right one, then her left, stuck out her tongue, and turned Nancy into an apple. Terence fell out of his chair. He was turned into an apple. Mauricia tried to run away. She was halfway to the door as Mrs. Gorf's right ear began to wiggle. When she reached the door, Mrs. Gorf's left ear wiggled. Mauricia opened the door and had one foot outside. When Mrs. Gorf stuck out her tongue, Mauricia became an apple. Mrs. Gorf picked up the apple from the floor and put it on her desk with the others. Then a funny thing happened. Mrs. Gorf turned around and fell over a piece of chalk. The three Erics laughed. They were turned into apples. Mrs. Gorf had a dozen apples on her desk. Joe, John, Todd, Stephen, Kathy, Paul, Nancy, Terence, Mauricia, and the three Erics, Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and Eric Ovens. Lewis, the yard teacher, walked into the classroom. He had missed the children at recess. He had heard that Mrs. Gorf was a mean teacher, so he came up to investigate. He saw the 12 apples on Mrs. Gorf's desk. "I must be wrong," he thought. "She must be a good teacher if so many children bring her apples." He walked down to the playground. The next day, a dozen more children were turned into apples. Lewis, the yard teacher, came back into the room. He saw 24 apples on Mrs. Gorf's desk. There were only 3 children left in the class. She must be the best teacher in the world, he thought. By the end of the week, all of the children were apples. Mrs. Gorf was very happy. "Now I can go home," she said. "I don't have to teach anymore. I won't have to walk up 30 flights of stairs ever again." Ooh, was that 30? I thought it was 13 earlier. "You're not going anywhere," shouted Todd. He jumped off the desk and bopped Mrs. Gorf on the nose. The rest of the apples followed. Mrs. Gorf fell on the floor. The apples jumped all over her. "Stop," she shouted, "or I'll turn you into applesauce." But the apples didn't stop, and Mrs. Gorf could do nothing about it. "Turn us back into children," Todd demanded. Mrs. Gorf had no choice. She stuck out her tongue, wiggled